Okay, so now we're live with Chris Ballard from Passive House Canada. So Chris is the CEO. I just want to mention, as always, you can use your the Q&A button at the bottom of the screen to ask your questions. You can also use your raise hand buttons if you want to talk directly with Chris. But on this, I'll just thank again our sponsors for today, ScreenCo and Quanix Building Products. And Chris, up to you with your presentation.
Well, very good. And thank you very much for the introduction. And thank you very much for the opportunity to be here with all of you today. As you can see, I am in the PEI mood. I have Lucy Maud Montgomery's house behind us where Anne of Green Gables was taped. So I'm in PEI, emotionally maybe, if not physically. So thanks again, everyone, for the ability to present today. And let me get the show on the road. I wanted to just talk about a few things today. I'm not going to give you a highly technical review of what a passive house window is. You're all experts. You know probably more than I know about the technical things. My predecessor was at your main conference this past November 2019, and gave a much more technical review of passive house components, etc. And that's fine, given his background as a builder, developer, and a guy who can swing the hammer. He gets that. I wanted to focus on some different things today as we spend some time together. So I will talk a little bit about Passive House and Passive House standards. So for those of you who don't know, Passive House is a membership-based organization. It's a primarily architects and engineers, but we have a lot of tradesfolk and component manufacturers are all part all part of the organization, and government decision makers as well. We do a lot of advocacy work. We're constantly talking to government decision makers, folks in the industry, other groups out there about high performance buildings. And you may know us if you've taken any of our education courses. We're big on education and capacity building within different sectors. We hold a variety of events. This year, like this event, our AGM will most likely be, our annual conference will most likely be online. We offer members technical services. We have about 15 people in 3 different cities across Canada, and we have about 15 instructors. And so it's a vibrant organization, and I'm always impressed by the folks who are there, who are involved, because they like to share information. One thing I have noticed, and I've been CEO for just a few months now, that this group of folks, they like to do more than talk and create policy ideas. These are the types of people who actually get things done. You know, they design, they build, they get their hands dirty. And when they speak from a position of experience and not theory alone. So a little bit about who this PHC's new CEO is, this Chris Ballard guy. Chris is a former Minister of Environment and Climate Change. I've been the Minister of Housing for Ontario. I was a municipal councillor for a number of years with a focus on economic development. Owned and ran my own business for 30 plus years. I've been executive director of a 60,000 member consumer advocacy organization. And I began my career as a journalist. So I've got a bunch of experience from all sorts of areas that ultimately led me to Passive House Canada, and what Passive House Canada and Passive House standards stand for is something that I find quite exciting, frankly. Moving along, so just a bit of context. I'm not going to go through all the bullet points here, but how do we find ourselves where we are today with regards to the demands of climate change? We all know about the Paris Accord, the Paris Agreement on climate change, where nations around the world have agreed to reduce their greenhouse gas emissions, namely carbon dioxide. The United Nations is involved with it, the EU, New Zealand, Australia, a number of American states. In Canada, we have the Pan-Canadian Framework, the federal government and the provinces working together to reduce their GHGs. Then we move to the municipal level. We have Vancouver's Zero Emissions Building Plan. We have Toronto's Zero Emissions Building Framework, which also addresses embodied carbon. We have the overarching greening government strategy. But I think what's been happening over the past year is more and more municipal governments at all levels, all sizes, are declaring climate emergencies and struggling with how do they meet that emergency. Most times they declare emergency because citizens have come to them and said, you must do this, you must act. And that's where we're at today. More and more professional associations as well, the architects, for example, are declaring a climate emergency so that in their practices, they need to address climate change and all of the ramifications that it brings. Here's an example from the United Nations. We talk about GHG emissions and energy, and this is why there's so much talk about the need to reduce energy inputs, operational carbon. Buildings consume up to about 40% of global energy use, and they contribute up to about 30% of annual global GHG emissions. In Toronto, it's actually 52% of GHG emissions originate from homes and buildings, primarily from burning natural gas to heat indoor spaces in water. So we're much worse in many areas of Canada than the world average. So how do we think governments should be addressing greenhouse gas emissions and reducing them? Outcome-based codes. Buildings designed to achieve specific performance outcomes. We need to move away from the reference building approach that the federal government pushes, but a number of cities in their green strategies ignore. And the reason is simple, that it's too easily gamed. There needs to be a central role for energy modeling in large buildings. There needs to be better monitoring and verification of green building claims. And there needs to be building benchmarking and labeling. And of course, the reason I'm here today, fenestration performance along with airtightness is absolutely crucial. So what is a passive house? Well, it started as an EU research project, but it has Canadian roots, and I'll get to that in a second. It sets specific performance targets. How you get to those targets is up to you in terms of building materials, but it's all about energy modeling. As I said, it's not prescriptive of how you get from point A to point Z. It leaves that up to you, but it certainly says that when you finish, the building has to meet certain standards. Interestingly, passive house is all about comfort, air quality, and hygiene requirements. That's how it started out. And if you build to those requirements, lo and behold, you get an exceptionally low energy or energy efficient building. Passive house standards really eliminate the performance gap. So there are building standards out there that present you with a checklist, and if you check the list, you get the sticker, regardless really of how the building performs at the end of the day. And passive house is different. You have to have the checklist, you have to have tests during construction, and you have to have the final test. And only then, when you pass that, do you get the sticker. If you look at passive house standards, they're about 90% more energy efficient in a new build compared to existing in a comparable code-built building, and about up to about 70% more efficient in retrofits. compared to more standard retrofitting. So you look at those numbers and you can begin to see why governments that are hard pressed to meet their Paris Accord or their Pan-Canadian agreement with regards to GHG reductions, you can see why they're looking at 90%, 70% with great interest. But here's something I want to show you. We talk about Passive House having Canadian roots, and it does. I have heard a number of people tell me that Passive House is all about a German building standard. It's a plot to sell European components like windows and doors. And nothing really could be further from the truth, in that back in the late 1970s, with the first OPEC oil embargo, the government of Saskatchewan commissioned a number of researchers. A physicist led the team, a chap by the name of Dr. Orr, and they wanted to know how they could house people using very little imported oil. Hence we have the Saskatchewan Conservation House, opened in 1977, still being lived in today. The water heater panels there on the front of the house are now gone, but all the other components, the windows, which were built by hand, are still in place today. When the Europeans in the 90s were casting about for a better way to build buildings, they came to Saskatchewan, they met with Dr. Orr and his team, they poured over all of the research that he and his team had compiled even before 1977. They took that back to Europe. They developed European standards. A chap by the name of Dr. Wolfgang Feist, one of the researchers, worked to further refine those standards and eventually founded what today is known as the Passive House Institute. So Passive House standards, I'm proud to say, have Canadian roots, and you can see the plaque on the door of this place if you ever were to visit Regina, and we should be very proud that Canada has been recognized for its role in building to this standard. So I won't go any further. What is a passive house? We've been through that. Let me carry on. The 5 principles of passive house design, I'll be really fast with this. The first is super insulation. So you have really nice thick walls filled with insulation, makes the house quite cozy. The floor, the foundations, all well insulated. Even under the foundations, the concrete basement floor will have thick insulation. You build to airtight construction. You put a building together that is thermal bridge free. It isn't easy for the cold to penetrate the building envelope or the heat to penetrate the building envelope. You have to use high quality windows with solar orientation so that you get the nice warm sun when it's needed in the cool weather, but you keep out the sun during the hot weather. And you have a ventilation system with heat recovery. Absolutely critical to have a quality ventilation system that brings fresh, clean air from the outside, filters it, and then heats it using exhaust air. Those are the 5 principles of passive house design. A little bit more about passive house. As I said, it's a standard that was designed by scientists. It's physics. You can't beat it because it's got the data and it is science-based. But we look at the Canadian average of energy use intensity in a residential building, and we see that the average building is using 146 kilowatt hours per cubic meter per year of energy. Not quite sure what that means. I am not an engineer, but it seems like a lot, especially when you compare it to the maximum for a passive house, which is 15 kilowatt hours per cubic meter per year. And you can see the red all the way down, right down to space cooling, where we may do a little air conditioning that's a little higher than the average building. But 15 compared to 146, you'll have to admit, is substantial. Again, government decision makers look at this and they understand that this goes a long way to driving down greenhouse gas emissions. It's even better for commercial buildings, which average 231 kilowatt hours per cubic meter per year, compared to the passive house standard of 15. These are numbers that are based in science. They can't be beat. So some of the characteristics of a passive house, and if you get an opportunity to attend our passive house open doors session, we may be doing it virtually this year, but it's wonderful to walk into a passive house building, whether it be a residence, condominium, commercial development, or public space, and just experience the attributes of passive house. But the characteristics are that it's a very design intensive. It starts with good design. So architecture first, then the systems come along. All of the builders, all of the folks involved in building to passive house must work together from the outset. So it delivers multiple benefits of better buildings, and resiliency is huge, that you can shelter in place and deal with future climate issues. There is a study the City of Toronto did a few years back that looked at the benefits of an apartment building built to passive house standards, even interfitted or retrofitted to passive house standards, compared to your regular apartment building in Toronto, and what happens in the middle of winter when the power goes out, or the middle of summer in a hot heat wave when the power goes out. You know, at best, it was something like 7 or 8 hours that folks were able to stay in their apartments before they had to be evacuated, and evacuated at great cost to the city, I might add, because the city would be responsible for housing them. Whereas a passive house building, they were there 10, 12, 13 days before it got either too cold or too hot and they had to move on. So again, GHG reductions, but you have you have levels of government saying, wow, you know, we could save millions by not having to find accommodation for people. Characteristics of a passive house: comfort, air quality, they're quiet, they're healthier, they're resilient, they're affordable, and they're low energy. So we talk about, we're big on retrofits. The passive house standard is called interfit. This is an example of a Hamilton, Ontario interfit. We have things that are essential to meet municipal goals. Deep energy retrofits can reposition existing buildings. So you don't have to tear them down. It's fairly easy to do an interfit retrofit. You know, the people, the tools, the components, very similar to new buildings. If you, however, have components that are specific to retrofits, that's a bonus, quite frankly. So the market, I think we can all agree, the market is in transformation. We only have to look at Vancouver, where 20% of rezoning applications in 2019 were for passive house standard buildings. We know that Toronto Community Housing Corporation has literally hundreds of millions of dollars in the bank, and is actively planning the retrofit of many of its large buildings. These will be retrofits to interfit standards, which means they will need components. Last figure I heard was something like 200,000 windows that would meet the interfit standard. That's a lot of windows, quite frankly. We need a rapid escalation in certified components. Canada is internationally competitive in design, and what I mean by that is our architects compete internationally for big projects, and we win. So there's a real potential to not only export design, but to export components as well. And Canada has a good reputation internationally for the quality of our products. So moving along, you know, what are some of the impacts on the fenestration industry? And obviously, you're the experts here more than I, but high performance values mean better products. There has to be a renewed focus on innovation. larger share of project budget for fenestration, even though perhaps the total square footage of glass is being reduced. The cost of that glass is higher. And we can position ourselves for international excellence. And, you know, I know windows have traditionally represented what, about 80% of, or up to about 80% of a building's exterior cladding. But with ever higher levels of energy efficiency performance required in buildings, the amount of glass has shrunk. And I get the angst, and I get the issues there, as well as having to redesign and rejig everything that goes into building to a high performance window. But I think we can look at this as an opportunity. So we know that by 2032, the standard window in Canada will be triple glazed with a high performance frame. And, you know, as an industry, we've really got three choices. As I can see, we can ignore that train coming down the track. We can sort of, well, we'll deal with it when it gets here. We can muddle through, or we can exploit it. And the business person in me says that's what we really need to focus on. And the former government minister in me and the town councillor in me says, wow, economic development opportunities, export development opportunities are ahead of us. So I want to get and spend a bit of time now talking, and this is where I'm more comfortable because of my background in cabinet. If government is mandating this move to high performance building standards, then government needs to be a part of the solution for manufacturers. And by that, I mean the fenestration industry, people who belong to your association. Government is responding to public demand. Government is responding to international pressure. But government just can't do it alone. It really needs to work with you folks and everybody in the building industry to make sure that we're ready and up to this challenge. So, you know, as the country emerges from this pandemic, the federal government it's signaled it's going to invest in the green economy. And in fact, we've got three ministers. Minister of Environment and Climate Change, Jonathan Wilkinson, Minister of Infrastructure, Catherine McKenna, she's the former Minister of Environment and Climate Change, and Minister of Heritage, Stephen Guilbeault. All of them have been tasked by the Prime Minister to plan the green launch of the Canadian economy. So, you know, Canada, we have a government, a federal government that's made a number of climate-friendly promises. It has set ambitious targets to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. And you know, the insiders are saying that COVID-19 recovery will provide a chance for decision makers to pivot to meet their long-term environmental goals. And indeed, they put 3 senior ministers on the job. That's of great interest to Passive House Canada. We have been working with Efficiency Canada, as has your association, to influence the government's green relaunch. But on top of that, Passive House Canada is directly lobbying the federal government with 3 objectives. We are engaged, we are educating, and we are trying to build awareness, not just about Passive House or Passive House standards, but the impact and the potential for growth on all of our industries, investments, and jobs right across the country. We have the opportunity right now to go beyond the status quo, to retrofit and build our buildings to the highest known and proven level of performance that support our country's climate goals, that stimulate job creation, skill development, and support made in Canada manufacturing of high quality building materials. I'll go back to a conversation I had with a social housing corporation that is going to be ordering tens of thousands of new windows for their deep energy retrofits. They would really, really like to invest in Canadian made product, not Canadian assembled, Canadian made product, and are looking for help in making sure that as they go to market, that the market is able to respond. We know that we can lead widespread sector transformation that will benefit our environment, our economy, and the overall health of our cities and residents. You know, it's a transformation, as I pointed out earlier, it's already started to occur. But if we don't take action now, the economic benefits will be reaped by suppliers in countries outside of Canada. As a former provincial politician, local city councillor, I would not be happy with that. We have to make sure Canada and Canadian industry is ready for this challenge. So at Passive House Canada, we're looking to work together with all of those affected by the transformation. We're looking to create investment and manufacturing and jobs right here in Canada, supported by government. And we're looking to create a vibrant national and international market for Canadian fenestration products. That's the least we can do. We are in this together. We're looking forward to supporting you and your association in any way that we can. And together, we are busy knocking on doors in Ottawa, in provincial capitals, in municipal town halls to talk about how we can facilitate the transformation to a lower carbon future, and at the same time, strengthen our economy, create good manufacturing jobs, strong manufacturing base right here in Canada. I will leave it there, and again, thank everybody for having me here for today's presentation. And I'm open for questions as long as they're not too technical, because the caveat is I'm not a builder. I'm a recovering politician, I guess you could say.
Okay, well, we actually do have quite a little bit of questions, and if it gets, if it's something you can't answer, it's fine. Maybe at some point later in the next few weeks or months, we could have another webinar like this with technical people from your side and our technical director. We could focus more on the technical aspect, but
would love to.
Yeah. So the first question we have is from Alexandra. Why are there different passive house organizations globally, and does Passive House Canada coordinate with other passive house organizations across the globe?
Yeah, well, there is the one mothership, Passive House, the Passive House Institute, which is based in Germany, and we have international organizations. We all adhere to PHI standards, so we only recognize one set of standards. Oftentimes, how those standards are communicated and taught is different depending on what part of the world you're in. But there's only one set of standards, so we work with passive house groups across Canada, across the North America, and internationally.
Okay, and that fits right into the other question here from Gina Gaudreau with AVFQ. The AVFQ is the Quebec Association for Door and Windows. Just
right.
So that's why she's asking, what is your link or collaboration? How do you collaborate with Maison Passive Québec, so Passive House Québec?
Oh, that's the perfect question for today, because I'm really happy to say that we have a wonderful partnership with Maison Passive Québec. Okay. Launched about 2 months ago, but it's probably only about a month and a half ago. Our main training courses, our 120 series, are now fully translated into French. As well, we have agreement from the Passive House International Institute folks that we will be able to translate their exam Come October, we'll be translating it into French and be able to offer it online. So we've got we're building a strong relationship with Maison Passif Quebec. And I think we've got courses running this week.
Okay, that's great. So that means you all work together.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, there's only one set of standards, and we all work to that set of standards.
Yeah. Okay, so we have Jeffrey Edison saying, it's more of a statement, but I'd like to hear you on this. So one of the stumbling blocks for the industry is the certification paths. So PHI you mentioned, and versus PHI US. So can you let us know a little bit more about that?
Well, the short of it is that we adhere to Passive House PHI standards for components and for quality assurance. But what we are doing more and more with our members is to help walk them through the technical process. So I can give you an example, may be Canadian manufacturer of HRVs. We need big ones for the big buildings that are currently being interfitted. And we have worked closely with the manufacturing sector to find a place in North America that can test and certify their equipment without having to ship it over to Germany or the UK for testing. So we're happy to work with organizations to do that, but we strongly believe there's only one standard, and that's the PHI standard. That's the one that we push.
Okay, so but right now there's some kind of competition between those two set of standards. Is that what I?
Well, I don't think there's any competition.
Yeah.
There's only the one standard, and then there's the others that aren't of the same quality, I would argue.
Okay. Is one goal of Passive House kind of looking at amalgamating the certification or forging certification program specific to the Canadian climate?
What we've been doing is our instruction, our courses have been Canadianized, if that's a word.
Okay.
So that I can give you an example there. We have a very good construction training series where we use Canadian terminology. So we're talking about R values, and we're not forcing people to convert to U values, that kind of thing. We leave that for the engineers and the architects to worry about. So we have Canadianized, but there's only one for the certification. There is the professional certification. There's the international exam, but not everyone has to do that whole series. It just sometimes if you're involved with business, the 120A, which is a real deep dive, 26 hours, is all you need in terms of an introduction to how Passive House systems work. The trades, we will be offering a Made in Canada exam, because Canadian trades much different than European trades.
Okay. Terry Adamson is asking, the BC ICE Fund assisted BC manufacturers to develop Passive House products. A great program that brought new Passive House windows into the local Canadian market. Now we need Canada to push for using Canadian products, as we still see many offshore Passive House products used. Is Passive House Canada working on this? And if so, how?
Absolutely. That's what I guess I was getting at in the second half of the presentation through our government relations efforts, is to convince the government of Canada that it needs to support this industry. It's government of Canada regulations and building codes, so it needs to take some responsibility. It needs to invest in this sector, not only to meet the growing need here in Canada, but also to look for offshore sales opportunities. If I can digress for 1 second and put on my hat from a previous career when I was the Minister of Environment and Climate Change, we had the Green Energy Act. It wasn't popular in some places. It was very popular in other places. But by June of 2018, it was employing over 144,000 Ontarians were directly employed in clean tech, clean energy projects that most of those jobs would not have been around had it not been for government investment, government policy that pushed the clean energy sector in the province of Ontario. I know we can do this across Canada with the fenestration industry as well. We need to support all of them, whether it be design or some help in getting products certified. We also need help. The association, the members of the association, I'm sure, could also use help in cracking some of the international markets. We'll need the federal government to help us do that.
Okay, sure. Well, our friends in Quebec, so Gina saying that's good news that you're working with Passive House Quebec. So
Great.
wanted to give you the message here. Just soon we have like something like 7 questions left, so
Okay.
we'll try to go through them as fast as possible.
And if you have time, I can go over I can start my presentation again, you know, so you don't have any dead air.
No, I think with 7 questions we're pretty good.
Okay.
So we have our technical director, Al Yogelis, mentioning Canadian manufacturers of high performance and passive house windows are complaining of competition from importers of windows from parts of Europe where subsidies may make important product less expensive than those made in Canada. So what Terry just mentioned. The important products do not come with qualification to Canadian test and performance standards and may not comply with material quality standards. What do you think can be done from a policy perspective?
Well, Al, that sounds like we're going to need a couple of cups of coffee to sort that one out. But that definitely is within that shopping list, that laundry list that we are taking to the federal government. And I think this is a perfect example of where Passive House Canada, since we're busy knocking on doors, let's work that into our messaging and give some real life examples of what's happening in the marketplace and the challenges that the fenestration manufacturing industry here in Canada faces. I'm happy to take that to the feds and to, and amplify, help amplify your voice.
So what we could do also, because as I mentioned, Al is our technical director. So I know you guys, I think you're in contact. If not, I'll put you in contact, but we would be happy to help you with that for sure. So
very good.
Al will not let you digress on that one. He's gonna.
Al has my number.
Okay, good. Okay, so we have Dave asking a really important question here. Is it possible to renovate a house like the Anne of Green Gables house behind you to Passive House standards without fundamentally changing its appearance?
Well, there's a question for the engineers and the architects, but I'm going to tell you, during my presentation, I think there was 1 or 2 slides of a white house, a white typical Prince Edward County, Ontario farmhouse. That's a heritage building that was interfitted to those standards. Okay. And I know from what I've seen in Europe, for example, where you have beautiful stone cathedrals and buildings, all interfitted without destroying the building itself or making the building not look or losing its heritage. They're able to interfit, maybe not to the high 70% of energy savings, but certainly a lot more energy savings than or lower energy use than before. So I'm going to say yes, you can do it. Don't exactly ask me how because I'm not the architect, but I know it's being done.
Okay. Dwayne Coop saying building costs will increase. Has there been any thought or research done regarding if this would result in less people being able to afford homes moving forward?
Well, I would strongly debate about whether it increases costs, quite frankly. There's more proof coming forward. Pennsylvania, the state of Pennsylvania, its social housing secretariat has said that all of its buildings have to be Passive House. All of its new buildings have to be Passive House. In the space of 3 years, the costs went from about a 5% premium to 3% lower than regular construction costs. If there is a cost, it tends to be the educational cost of the providers, of the trades, of the builders. I have a webinar. If you go to the Passive House Canada's YouTube channel, last week's webinar, we had 2 folks on who are both the money people for builders in BC and Alberta who talk about the myth that passive houses have to cost more.
Okay.
Fact of the matter is, a lot of passive houses traditionally have been ones that have been custom builds. And so therefore, I mean, a custom built home compared to a track built home is comparing apples to oranges. And so it looks like they're more expensive, but any custom built home is more expensive than a track built home. So I would argue vehemently that that passive homes are actually affordable, especially if you look at a 20-year ownership period. The cost of maintenance goes down, not just homes, commercial properties, towers.
Yeah, I guess he means more like that. You know, the upfront price point. I guess like that.
Well, yeah, you pay more. I get what he says. You know, you're going to pay more for windows,
Yeah.
and you know, you're going to pay more for windows and doors. You're going to pay way less though for mechanicals. Mechanical systems are going to be simpler. You know, what's the cost of a high performance furnace? I put one in my house about 3 years ago, and I think it was close to $12,000 I paid. That's more than enough in a new home, more than enough to put in both air conditioning and a heat exchanger. And if my house was a passive house, about a 1200 watt heater would be all I needed in the wintertime to heat it. So operating costs are down, maintenance costs are down. There may be a small premium for passive house, but it's not the significant one that people fear.
So we have Peter asking, where would be the information source to find the historical and future volume of passive house, PHI, smaller housing, larger projects, commercial, etc. in Canada by province? And Rick is asking, is there a map of Canada which shows the different passive house zones? He was not able to find it, to find one recently.
Yeah, I believe I'll start with that question first. I believe that that map is, or those zones are included in the PHPP software that we use to do the energy modeling. When you put in the area, it tells you what the zone is. But that's a good question that that I can ask my technical director. Exactly where we get our info, where we can put our hands on that. I know if people have taken any of the courses, they probably had it given to them, or
Well,
it's online.
if you could send it to us, maybe we could distribute to our membership.
Yeah.
Something that
Okay.
we like to do.
So it was I'll coordinate with you at the end. It was the map of passive house zones.
Sure.
Sorry. And the first question was,
the first question was, where would be the information source to find the historical and future volume of PHI, smaller housing, larger projects, commercial, etc. in Canada by province?
that's a really, that is the $64,000 question. I would have to say that that such an estimate doesn't exist at this time of passive house. There's studies that are talking about that. There's studies that have been done that estimate the volume of high performance houses or what the market may be. But it's a challenge for all of us to drill down and say, is it going to be high performance or is it going to be passive house performance? But that's something that I'll get the folks to look into as well.
Great. So we have someone asking, globally there are a total of 1,630 certified passive house projects. How many certified passive house projects have been completed in Canada?
That's how many are certified? What we find in Canada is that there's a lot of homes built to passive house standards, but do not complete the certification process because of the difficulty, quite frankly. It's one of the services that Passive House Canada is now able to do, will shortly be able to do, I should clarify, is to make the certification of small buildings both easier and less expensive. So for now, there's, you know, I think it's only 140 or so buildings. And on our website, you can get to the spot that has a Google map of Canada with all the little pins of all the projects. But that really represents just a small number of the projects that that have been done, completed, because it speaks to just those that are certified.
Okay. So we have Dominic asking, I believe that to have a product certified, we have to go with the Passive House Institute in Germany. Do you know if there's some news to have a Canadian lab able to perform the evaluations and certification?
Yeah, and that's what we're working with the suppliers on. I mentioned earlier about working with heat recovery ventilation units. We found places in North America to do it. I know we can find more local solutions for you. It's part of what we're trying to develop as we need to assist the industry. So I'll get that information to you as well.
Okay, great. Uh, and then we have Terry going back on Al's question, or technical director. He's just saying that the answer to Al's point is code enforcement. So that's his 2 cents on it. And yeah, and Al is just mentioning that he would like to work with you on your project. So
Very good.
now
And
it's official, it's recorded. You can
we can go back, and I
yeah,
know you know, and the person who wrote the comment about code enforcement is right. We
yeah.
need the right codes, and then we need to have them enforced.
Okay.
We're working with the building officials, BOA BC, on training around high performance buildings and how building officials, that includes building inspectors, who obviously are part of code, building code world. But we're looking at some point to roll that type of education out across Canada when we find some partners in other provinces, or maybe with the national organization. And I think as building officials are brought up to speed, that should help.
Sure. Well, so that's the time we had today. I want to thank you again for accepting our invitation here, and I think it was a really important topic as I saw the amount of questions, right?
Very good. Well, listen, thank you very much. And you know, we're always, if people have questions, we're around. And certainly Al knows how to get in touch with us. But any of your members have specific questions or technical questions, we'll do our best to either answer them with the engineers we have working with us, or we know all the folks at PHI, we can get some answers that way as well. So listen, thank you very much. I really look forward to working with your organization as we go door knocking in Ottawa, even for the next few weeks if we have to do it virtually. Thank you.
That's great. Thanks again. And I just want to tell everyone that we're going to keep going with this spring conference at 1 Eastern this afternoon. So in a couple of minutes. And we're going to talk about the market transformation roadmap with Kimberly Curran, so from NRCan. So see you there. Thanks again, Chris, and talk to you soon.
Bye-bye.
Bye.